that the sun shines down its power to all the world and makes the wind blow strong as it will. I wonder hope gentle rains can fall upon the land, so lovely earth can stay lovely still. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is another edition of Energy Week with George Harvey and Tom Finnell. And Tom Finnell is actually here today.
Back in the flesh.
Back in the flesh. Wounded Tom Finnell. You can see that there's something wrong with his ear. That's not what kept him out. He's been having a series of, the ear is the least of all worries. And
I'll give you a quick rundown if you want to know.
Yeah, let's hear about it,
I've
Tom.
had a hiatal hernia for a long, long time.
Yeah.
You know, and that's where there's something wrong with where the esophagus passes through the diaphragm.
Yeah.
Well, apparently, without any notice in advance, it broke apart. And I went to the emergency room. They sent me right up to Dartmouth.
So
I met with a team of 6
did you go
surgeons.
up on land or on a helicopter?
I went up on land in an ambulance, though.
Oh, dear.
Met with 6 surgeons, and they said, yeah, we can fix it. Yeah, we'll be all right. And they did. But the doctor scared the hell out of me. He says, you know, your stomach is all wrapped around your esophagus. You know, if I don't do something real quick, it's going to die. And if it dies, you're going to die. So I said, go for it.
Oh, man. That's what I would say.
But just to make matters worse, I've also had what I lovingly refer to as pneumonia, otherwise known as a knee effusion or water on a knee, which is very minor. It's not life-threatening at all, but boy, it makes it hard to walk.
Yeah. Yeah. And then?
And stand, and you know.
Yeah. And then, of course, you went and saw Rebecca Jones, who fixed your ear.
Yeah, I got a little growth removed from my ear, so you know.
I had a little growth removed from my head.
Yeah. I wouldn't have noticed it if you didn't say anything. There was no the scar.
No, yeah, that's right. It worked really well. Actually, there were 2 of them. So we've been fighting the good fight, both of us. I think we should probably get underway here.
Yeah, I think we should.
Starting with last Friday, November 7th. Projections for a death spiral in the utility sector are premature, according to Moody's Investment Service. The industry is being transformed by widespread adoption of distributed generation, but utilities, state lawmakers, and regulators are acting to refine utility cost recovery models, decreasing the threat of disruption. And, you know, Tom, what that says to me is the utilities are starting to learn, and the people who are regulating them are starting to put efforts into the correct places.
I think you're absolutely right. I mean, the utilities, you can't say they don't know. More like they don't want to know. I mean,
Some of them.
They've made out very well under the old model.
Yeah.
But the old model is dying.
Yeah.
It wasn't a possibility 20 years ago to think about making power without having to pay for fuel.
Yeah.
And that's now right here.
Yeah.
Right here and now.
Yep.
And that's going to be the future of power generation.
That's right. 20
years from now, maybe a little longer than that, you'll be looking back at today and say, you know, those idiots actually had to pay for their fuel.
Yes.
I got a picture up there of the death spiral.
Death spiral.
And for those who don't know what they mean, I'll define it here. It's used to describe a scenario in which the growth of distributed generation reduces utility power sales and demand for electricity. So the well-established guys are in a different boat now. Prompting utilities to raise rates, higher rates can make distributed generation more attractive and spur more rooftop solar and distributed generation installations, leading to a downward spiral for utilities. Well, as you just alluded to, the utilities are starting to become aware of this. And they're starting to recognize it and say, hey, how can we get on this bandwagon? Because this is the way of the future.
Right.
And they're doing it. They're starting to do it.
Well, you know, one of the things that I saw recently in Australia, the utilities in Australia have come to the conclusion that that they can save money on this distributed power thing by taking their more remote customers and going to the more remote customers and saying, look, we'll help you set yourself up to be off grid.
Localized mini grid.
That's right. That's right. Which means that they don't have to maintain miles and miles and miles of transmission for 100 people who are 500 miles from nowhere.
Which benefits them.
Benefits them. But there are a lot of things that have to be considered in this new business paradigm.
You know, we're fortunate here in Vermont because Vermont Green Mountain Power is
really
well on top of this.
Yeah,
and
way out in the forefront. and actually, there are a lot of utilities that could copy them because 80% of the utilities I've read don't have really extensive generating facilities. They're just buying power from one place and selling it to another.
Well, absolutely. So they don't have a vested interest in making power and selling power.
They just have
that's a lot less than it was 20 years ago, even with the big utilities. I mean, New York State's Niagara Mohawk was at one time a big generator. Now they're called, I don't know, they got bought by an English company, National Grid.
Oh, National Grid.
Well, they're not just Niagara Mohawk, but they bought Niagara Mohawk.
Okay.
So they've pretty much...
Is that the same National Grid that's in Massachusetts?
Yeah.
Ah, that explains things.
So they're not generating like they were. I mean, at one time, Niagara Mohawk was the generating, named after the generating facilities.
Yeah.
And they're getting obsolete, getting lesser, more distributed generation. So National Grid has bought it up, and they say what we do best is not generation, it's operation.
Right.
That's what they're doing.
There you go. Okay, next item. That last item, by the way, was from Platts, and the next one is from Clean Technica. There is more than enough geothermal energy in British Columbia to power the province's grid. Yet not one site has been developed. Geothermal energy has never been invited to bid on calls for power.
You know, I read that article in depth, and the question going through my mind is why? You know, how come? And it's all wrapped up in politics.
It's all wrapped up in politics, but you know, there is one thing to bear in mind, and that is geothermal. There's a lot of geothermal out there. There's more than enough geothermal in the United States to power the country.
There's more than enough in Canada to power Canada.
Yep, but one little problem is using geothermal power causes earthquakes.
It can. It depends on how you use it, but yeah. It can.
But you know, they've known about geothermal. It says here there's 150 known hot springs in Canada. And I remember when I was in college, I had a biology teacher who was talking about some missionary who went out to convert the Indians or whatever he was doing. And he built
found the hot springs and never came back.
He built a greenhouse.
Oh, okay.
And the greenhouse was heated by hot springs. And he was able to grow tropical fruit. And my recollection was that it was bananas, but I might be wrong on that one. But he was growing tropical fruit in a greenhouse in the Yukon.
Well, there's a lot of geothermal in Canada, but they've never used it for generating power, as we just found out.
Yeah.
If you look up there on the map, you'll see that little green area.
Yeah.
That's mostly Alberta.
Yeah.
And you can see Alberta sitting on top of a certain type of geothermal.
Right.
And I can relate to that. And I was working up in Calgary for a week one time, and it was late May, early June. And myself and one of my associates decided to go up to Banff to go skiing for the day.
Yeah.
And on the way down from Banff, we stopped at the Banff Resort, which was hot springs. And we got into what I think is the world's largest swimming pool. It was the largest
I've seen pictures.
It's about 3
gigantic.
football fields.
Yeah, it's
huge.
huge.
About 3.5, 4 feet deep.
And it steams. And it steams.
And it steams. You know,
in the winter.
the pain from the muscles just drained right out.
Oh, man.
It was lovely.
Yeah.
So now they're starting to look at this stuff and saying, you know, what have we overlooked?
Yeah. Yeah. We have to keep going. We're
a couple of pictures here from this article that are interesting, because besides being able to generate power, there's still heat in that water.
Yes.
And there's two pictures here where they're using that heat. Geothermal shrimp and German fruits and vegetables.
There you go.
They're generating, in the case of geothermal shrimp, they've got a whole factory to grow shrimp.
Yeah. And that's the waste heat from the geothermal,
That's the waste heat.
which is where the heat is free. So
Yeah.
this is waste heat that's free to begin with.
God, how
What
the
can
money
you
rolls
say?
in.
Yeah, isn't that funny?
Back to you.
Back to me. Rock Hill Herald had this article on still on Friday. Ice Energy, that's the name of a company, today announced it was awarded 16 contracts from Southern California Edison to provide 25.6 megawatts of behind-the-meter thermal energy storage. Ice Energy's proprietary Ice Bear system uses electricity at low demand times to freeze water, which provides cooling during high demand periods. In other words, the air conditioning is run when the demand for power is low.
Bingo.
So you've got ice
They
that you can
generate
use,
ice, and then they over the ice. And you're cool.
and you're cool. Yeah.
It's not what the picture describes, plugging an electric appliance into an ice cube.
No, it's not that. But
But
it's kind of like that.
It's a good idea.
Yeah.
It's an idea whose time has come.
Well, it's like pumped storage hydroelectric. It's
It's a different way of storing.
It's a way of storing power.
And because of the intermittency of things like solar and wind,
Yeah.
people are starting to look at different ways of storing
Yeah.
power.
Right.
I was listening to something on the radio today about a flywheel. A
Yes.
huge flywheel.
Yes. Where is the flywheel, Tom? There's a
Well,
flywheel.
There's one of them in New York State, right across the border from North Adams.
Okay.
That's, I think it's Millerton or something like that.
Okay.
That's the town.
Okay.
That's kind of an experimental station, but it's relatively.
It is on the grid.
It's on the grid, yeah.
Yeah. So this is a pilot plant.
The pilot plant, yeah.
Okay. The next item on Saturday, November 8th, is from Renew Economy. A small German town in southern Bavaria is participating in an interesting experiment proving that high renewables future is viable. Wildpolsried.
Say it again.
Wildpolsried. I got that. Somebody taught me how to say a German R with your glottal system.
Your glottal.
Glottal. That's right. Wildpolsried. You remember My Little Margie?
Yeah.
Every time she got in trouble, she'd say, Population 2,600 currently produces 500% more energy than it needs through renewable energy systems and sells the surplus power back to the grid. This is an example of a town. Yeah, it is. It's an example of a town that has invested money in equipment to manufacture its own power, and that power comes from a variety of sources. Wind is very big. Biomass is big.
Solar, I got them here.
Yeah.
Biomass,
Yeah.
hydro, small hydro,
Yeah.
solar thermal.
They do anything that they think might work.
That's obviously what they're doing. They're grabbing at everything.
And I think their biomass includes both wood chips or surplus wood or something and biodigesters.
Well, this says waste wood from local forests.
Okay.
But I wouldn't
But
be
doesn't it
surprised
say
they're not
agricultural waste too?
It doesn't say that, but
Okay.
this is Germany.
Yeah, if they've got agricultural waste, they're either using it or they're selling it
They
to the
don't
next
throw
town
stuff
over.
away.
But they're only one of a bunch. You know, Güssing in Austria has the same kind of thing. Feldheim, which is near Berlin. But there are other places. There's the island of Egg in Scotland that we've talked about.
We've talked about that.
We've talked about Greensburg, Kansas. There's the island of Tokelau in the South Pacific, which is 100% solar. Mm-hmm. And although they do have diesel backup, they're powered by batteries normally at night.
There's a takeaway here. They've created 140 new jobs.
Yes.
Got an ecological training center that developed out of it.
140
Tourism has increased.
jobs. 140 jobs
For a
in a
population
town of 2,600.
Yeah, that's all right.
Yes, it is. That's about one job for every other
And
family.
apparently a lot of people, because it says over 100 delegations visiting the town each year, a lot of people are going there to learn.
Yeah.
how we can do it.
How do you do it? That's right. Although you don't have to go there to learn. There are a lot of
The increased
places.
revenue has allowed the town to have its own doctors. Apparently it didn't.
Yeah.
A recreation center, a fire station, and other amenities not available to many other towns of a similar size.
Yep. Yep. And there's a group of people in Brattleboro who are getting together to look into this, and including myself.
Yeah.
You're invited if you want to come. I'll invite
I'm
you.
probably already in on it.
No, this is actually kind of new.
I'm still probably already in on it.
Okay, there you go.
It's got anything to do with Morris Pierce?
No.
Oh, okay.
No, but it's. I'll see to it that you.
He was
you
supposed
get
to
the
have spoken at the
information.
last energy meeting. I wasn't able to go.
Yeah. No, this is it's an unofficially constituted group as for now. It might become a subcommittee of the Energy Committee or something like that.
Something like that. Well, it's an idea whose time has come.
I think it is.
And Brattleboro's in a good position to do it.
Very good position to do it. Okay, Daily Times. A 231 megawatt solar power plant broke ground in Okayama Prefecture in western Japan. It is expected to be Japan's largest solar power plant. The plant is located in a disused salt pan. It was scheduled to begin operation in the first half of 2019 with 920,000 solar panels, and it will cost $950 million.
Yeah, there's a picture of it up there. It's huge.
Yeah.
This is huge. This is generating probably about more than a third of what Yankee would be generating now if it was operating at full output,
At full output,
Yeah.
which it will not do.
which is no longer doing.
Yeah. No, what I'm saying is this plant will not be operating at full output 24 hours a day, obviously.
Well, of course not.
Because it's solar.
It's solar. But
Yeah.
still, it's a big, well, you can look at that picture.
Yeah. It's huge.
This is a very, very
Yeah.
large. One of the problems with solar, a matter of fact, really the only problem, is it takes a lot of space.
Yes, but there are ways of using solar in conjunction with other things.
Absolutely.
Like grazing sheep.
Or putting it on top of a water reservoir.
Or putting it on top of the city
Buildings.
roofs, a lot of
Parking
stuff
lots.
to do. Yep.
We've only started to scratch the surface.
Oh yeah, just imagine if you used solar as along every road in the United States. It would be interesting to calculate if you just had solar panels running along every road where it was feasible to do it, what the generating
Like the
capacity
breakdown
would be.
lane.
Yeah,
Yeah, could be done.
up above
Up
or
above,
next
yeah.
to the road, so it doesn't get in the
Doesn't
way of
interfere
anything.
with the road.
Exactly. Okay, the next item comes from Truth Dig. A man responsible for maintaining India's power supply says he wants the country's coal production to double in the next 5 years. The Minister of State for Power, Coal, and New and Renewable Energy says India needs to dig twice as much coal as it does today if it is to meet its soaring energy demand. And
I bet you $2 it doesn't happen. Two
against what?
There's a picture of one of India's open pit coal mines. But India doesn't have enough coal to do this plan, so they're going to have to be importing coal.
Well,
And the Indian people aren't stupid.
no, they have not been noted for being stupid. This just makes me think, what would happen in India if they did this would be very similar to what's happening today in China.
Oh, absolutely.
And
And this article refers to that.
there was an item that came in after I did my blog today about Chinese imports of coal.
Yeah.
They have gone down 50%.
Yeah.
Ha, man. Okay.
Well, you've certainly seen some of the pictures of the air pollution in
Oh,
China.
it's awful. It's absolutely awful.
Everybody walking around with masks on.
Yeah, and it's not just in China either.
No.
Okay. A report, this is on Sunday, November 9th, a report from the Institute of Self-Reliance says locally owned renewable energy projects create more economic benefits than absentee-owned projects, and they are less likely to encounter community opposition. The enacting policies to support local renewable power states stand to gain thousands of jobs and millions of dollars. This is from the San Diego Free Press.
That's
What have we got
almost
there?
fundamental.
Yeah, but you know, people don't think about
No,
this.
I know it.
They really don't think about it.
Well, the money comes in from outside.
Yeah.
And what they're saying here is the money's got to come locally.
Well, but the other thing too is the money that you've got local. If it is owned locally, stays
bingo.
locally.
That's what they say here. Locally owned projects are more likely to use local labor
Yeah.
and materials
Yeah.
and borrow from local banks.
There you go.
Bingo.
Bingo. And which means that they support the purchase of local cars in the local car lots for anybody who happens to own a car lot.
Well, you got a big international firm. They're probably tied in with big international constructors who are taking
Right.
workers from all over the world.
Right. When you refuel in the past, Vermont Yankee, where did the workers come from?
Well, they're migratory.
They're migratory, exactly.
Bingo, bingo, bingo. They follow
That's
the
right.
jobs.
That's right.
And here you're saying creates local jobs.
Right. Now, we've got the opportunity to do that in Brattleboro right now.
Mm-hmm.
How much money do we spend on electricity every year?
You know that number.
$24 million
It's a
goes,
lot.
and it moves out of the Brattleboro economy every
Yep.
year. And if we were to add to that the means to use the waste heat from the production of energy and such things as air source heat pumps, ground source heat pumps, river sourced heat pumps, you know, whatever you want to do. If we had a unified approach that was balanced to do this, we could cut out the $25 million a year we move out of our economy for heat.
You're totally on the ball there. But we, as a nation, have been conditioned into thinking other than that.
Absolutely.
Otherwise,
think about Brattleboro with $50 million staying in its economy that is currently leaving every year.
I think.
What would that
I
do?
think everybody in town would benefit.
I think everybody in town would benefit.
We wouldn't
yeah.
be worrying about
Even the people
how to pay for a police station.
Yep, even the people who complain, you know, about the money that would be used. I don't know. Anyway, next item comes from Energy Matters. Inspired by bamboo's adaptation to wind, the University of Vermont, ever hear of those guys?
Yeah.
Engineers developed a low-cost micro-wind turbine. The small bamboo vertical axis wind turbine is combined with a solar panel. Bamboo has a tensile strength similar to steel. I'm not surprised, but I didn't know that.
No, bamboo's very strong.
Very strong stuff, but without the weight, and it is grown rather than mined. And you know, when I lived in the UK, we had bamboo growing in our yard.
Did you really?
Yes.
Yeah. You mean
Yeah.
real
Honest to
Southeast
goodness,
Asian bamboo.
Bamboo. We also had, not in the yard, but down the road, we had palm trees.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Even knowing about that, I was blown away when I discovered the UK has local scorpions.
This is a nice little picture.
It
though.
is.
It's a small turbine. This
Right.
is not going to power an off-the-grid house.
But it doesn't have to be built that small either. This,
oh, no.
this
No,
idea
the concept
could
is
be
bigger.
right.
And of course, you get 6 or 7 of them.
Yeah.
You know, one in each corner of the house, one
Right.
in each corner of the
Right.
barn. You know,
Right.
and bingo.
Yep.
There you are.
Yep.
And his system has photovoltaic and a storage battery.
Right.
Part of it.
Right.
So these things are little
They're little-
standalone modules.
Yes.
You probably could power a little vacation home, a little weekend home or something like that. But I don't think you're going to be able to power, you know, an off-the-grid home, living room.
I have known people, Tom, who have been powered by 175 watts of solar panel.
Oh, it's possible. It just takes a little bit different approach to
It
living.
takes a very different approach to living. Yeah.
Hey, there are some people who live off-grid, don't have any power at all.
That's true, and I've known
Kerosene
some of them too.
lanterns
The principal of the high school in the town that I used to live in New Hampshire.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah, he had no power, had no
power.
water,
No water even.
no water, no power. I don't know what he did for water, but
Well, I'm sure he had a spring, you know.
he might have.
Yeah.
He might have. He didn't have a. I mean, I had a water supply that came from a spring, but it was above the house, so I had pressurized water even when the electricity was out. Next item. from Tree Hugger. For millions of Americans and many more worldwide, rooftop solar is already cheaper than electricity from the grid. But until recently, grid-scale solar projects weren't cheaper than other types of power plants, ignoring externalities, which we shouldn't really do, but we do. And this is changing. And what that all means, I'd better translate this. If you want to have power at your house, the cheapest way to do it in Vermont is to buy the solar panels and the batteries and put them in, not necessarily the batteries, but the solar panels. Buy the solar panels, put them in, if they can be net metered even if they're not at your house. That's cheaper than buying grid power. Solar is cheaper than grid power. There's a reason for that, and the reason is that you're paying retail
it's like
for the
wholesale
power.
retail.
The utilities have pay wholesale.
Pay wholesale.
So it is not, solar power has not been all that great a deal for utilities yet.
But it's starting to happen.
It's happening.
Which is the message from this this article.
And when the person says ignoring externalities, which we shouldn't, but really do, but we do it.
It makes the math simpler.
Huh?
Makes the math simpler.
Well, it makes the math simpler, but it's also something that benefits certain people who really want us to ignore the externalities. And I'm thinking actually of the coal industry, because they say coal is cheap, coal is cheap.
Ignoring the externalities.
When you get the externalities in there, coal is unbelievably expensive.
Well, you got to get it from here to there.
And it's not just that. It's you burn coal, you're putting the products of coal into the atmosphere, and that makes people sick. Well,
you don't have to pay for it.
375,000 people in the United States die every year because of fossil fuel contamination.
I don't know the number, but that's kind of scary.
It is. The World Health Organization says 7 million people every year worldwide are being killed by air pollution.
And there's other people who aren't dying, but they're still suffering.
A lot of them. And the cost of that, the cost of just the medical, is in the neighborhood of $1 trillion a year for fossil fuels. And the fossil fuel industry does not want you to include that in your calculations. Yep.
I wouldn't bet against that.
So, next, Clean Technica has provided us with this on Monday, November 10th. The Swiss Center for Electronics and Microtechnology recently announced it has made white solar PV modules to use on buildings, offering applications in several consumer-centered sectors. The technology can be used to modify any crystalline solar PV module to make white or colored modules. And that means if you've got a White House, you could conceivably
that's basically what the picture is.
Replace your siding with
I think,
solar
the article doesn't agree, but I think that right up in there where that arrow is, they're all solar panels.
That's what it looked like to me.
These things.
Yes,
okay?
That's what it looked like.
And if they wanted them green, they could get them in green.
Yeah. This is interesting. This is really interesting.
Well, it makes a lot of sense. I mean, let's say I'm an architect, and I want to put solar panels up, but they're all black.
Yeah.
It just doesn't fit with my decor.
Yeah.
I'm not going to do it.
Well,
but now I got an option.
Yeah, absolutely. And this could be very important. And I really expect that this is going to be, I expect that this is going to be very important in the not distant future.
Well, it certainly expands the opportunities. Now, they cost a little bit more. But so what?
We're talking about decor here.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
And the price is going to come down as they become more frequently used. Matter of fact, we may come, not too distant future, to a point where people don't use black solar panels anymore.
Unless they want black solar panels.
Unless they want them,
yeah. Okay, next from Business Green. New renewable energy projects create 10 times more green jobs than similar-sized fossil fuel investments, new research has found. I could have told you that. They didn't have to do the research.
Yeah, I couldn't get into this article.
Oh, couldn't you? Okay.
Yeah.
We'll just breeze through it then. A study from the UK Energy Research Centre, taking data from the US, Europe, and China, suggests green energy provide a boost to employment, short-term construction jobs, and lifetime plant jobs. Next, on Tuesday, November 11th, grid operators, this from the Energy Collective, Grid operators may be able to use buildings to help regulate grid frequency as they integrate more renewable energy sources. Variable speed drives used to run heating and cooling systems can be rapidly modulated by grid operators to keep the frequency of the electricity on the grid within necessary tolerances. That's kind of
That's a
fascinating.
very ticklish operation, is keeping that frequency.
But you know, one of the things that happens here, Tom, is that those computers they use are really fast.
Bingo. It's not Bob Cratchit with a green eye shade anymore.
Yeah, if you say to the computer, take pi, the number, square it. It's done.
Oh, sure.
Much faster than the clicking of the finger.
Yeah.
Much faster than I could do it, even with a slide rule.
So what they're saying here is existing motors that are right now generating heating and or air conditioning can be connected to the grid operator,
Right.
so that he can play with those motors and fine tune the
Isn't that lovely?
the frequency. It is. I mean, you know, it's people thinking outside of the box.
Yes, it is. Okay, our next piece is from ESI Africa. Is that what's up there?
That's what's up there. That's a
Kenya?
Kenya geothermal.
Wow. The Kenya Electricity Generating Company decided to capitalize on their geothermal resources. Why not? By adding 280 megawatts of geothermal energy to the national grid. Why not? And the power started feeding into the national grid in July. Kenya has saved $100 million in the first 3 months of operation.
Well, reading through the article, it's just amazing they hadn't thought of it long ago, because this is replacing diesel.
Yeah.
Well, Kenya's
But
still, you know, it's got a few built-up areas.
Yeah.
It's still pretty much a rural country.
And part of the problem they've had is that in the past, when they went to find somebody who was an expert on energy, he wasn't an expert on geothermal energy.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Well, geothermal is an overlooked resource the world around.
It is. I think it is, yeah.
And right now, as you said, there's a downside. It can cause earthquakes. They'll overcome that. Somehow or another, that will be overcome.
They will overcome it, or they'll live with it. That's another possibility. It's a, you know, if you're doing geothermal in Alberta or Kenya, it's a very different thing from doing geothermal under New York City.
Yeah.
You can have a lot of these people. I knew a woman who grew up in Kenya, and she lived in a house that was made of grass and had a dirt floor.
Oh, cool.
And she absolutely loved it.
Yeah.
And I knew her because she was a French teacher at a time when I was teaching. But she loved that childhood in the grass shack in Kenya. And that grass shack, if it's hit by an earthquake, is not going to be damaged. And if it were damaged, you could patch it, you know.
Well, not all earthquakes are damaging.
That's also true. And the ones associated with geothermal power are usually pretty light.
Well, I remember doing some work at my house in Wardsboro. Accompanying me was a friend of mine who was a contractor out in California. So he was, you know, showing me what to do.
Yeah.
And we were working on something around it. And all of a sudden, we hear this rumbling stuff. You know?
Yes.
What the hell is that? Well, he's from California. He said, oh, that's an earthquake.
Yeah.
You know, there wasn't any damage, but I can't even say I felt the house shake. It was a noise.
Yep. I had 2 earthquakes that I experienced in New Hampshire. Mm-hmm. And they were, one of them moved the books around on the shelves a little bit. But it's kind of alarming. Anyway, the next item comes from UPI.com. Denmark's government plans to have the country completely off fossil fuels by 2050, including cars. One problem with this is that energy production from wind and solar cost very little to run. So, the more they appear, the less energy will cost. Mm-hmm. This is a problem because it means energy companies will have to struggle to make any profit at all.
Well, that's what they got to figure out how to do.
That's what they have to figure out.
And what they do best is distributing power and maintaining that distribution network.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
They got the technology, they got the trained people, they know how to do it.
That's right.
And that's where the niche is going to be.
That's right. That's right. And I've seen people talking about how their power meter is running backwards, and they have more power than they need. They get an energy bill of $18 a month for the connect fee, and that connect fee is important because it means they're connected to the grid.
Yeah.
And connected to the grid, as much as we can talk about what a wonderful thing it is to be off-grid, connected to the grid is a very nice thing.
It's convenient as hell.
Yeah, it is. The grid is probably the cheapest
It's nice
battery
if
in
you
the
can
world.
go either way.
That's right. The grid is the cheapest battery available. So the next item from Clean Technica, Massachusetts is currently considering extending its net metering qualification guidelines to include hydroelectric projects over 60 kilowatts in capacity, in addition to those under 60 kilowatts.
Which is what they are now.
Yeah. This would put hydroelectric on level ground with solar, wind, energy and anaerobic digesting systems in the state.
That makes sense.
It does. It's a beautiful thing. If you had, for example, the dam in Hinsdale. There's a dam in Hinsdale.
Yeah.
Very near the downtown.
Yeah.
And that dam is underutilized. Or at least it was the last time I talked to
There's like a paper mill next to it or something like that.
No, this is actually right in the middle of the town.
Oh, okay.
I talked to a fellow who was connected with that, and he said that it only had a third of the amount of power being generated that it could produce.
Oh, it is generating power.
It is generating
Okay.
power, and but they didn't have money to put in the other turbines. They may have by now, but I'm just using this as an example. It would mean that a group of people could approach the owner of the dam and say, "How would you feel about us taking a spot here and having a net metered project?" It would be a reasonable thing to do. The dam is already there. You know,
the damage has been done.
That's right, literally. Okay.
They probably powered a mill at one time.
I don't know what it did. That dam looks relatively new to me, but I don't know. What have you got there on the screen?
This is just relating to that. It's just a picture of a small hydropower project.
Okay.
I mean, it's artist's rendition. It isn't necessarily in Massachusetts, but it's just it shows what a small hydro project might look like.
Okay.
And there they have a dam up there, and they divert they call it a weir,
Yep.
and they divert the water, and it comes down and goes back into the stream.
Yeah. Well,
So that's basically what they're talking.
there are a lot of ways to use hydro to make
Oh, yeah.
power.
Oh, yeah.
Lots and lots and lots of ways. Okay, next Wednesday. This is yesterday. U.S. President Barack Obama and Chinese President Xi Jinping.
You're not as good in Chinese as you are
I'm
in
not as
German.
good at Chinese. I'm pretty bad at Chinese. Announced both countries will curb greenhouse gas emissions over the next 2 decades. The U.S. would cut its 2005 level of carbon emissions by 26 to 28% before 2025. China would peak its carbon emissions and get 20% of its energy from zero carbon sources by 2030. This from CNN. And
I was
this
listening
is
to a
important.
critique on this morning on NPR.
Really?
And basically, they were praising the concept, but they say there's no teeth in it.
Yes. Well.
There's nothing, no mandate here.
Yeah.
So right now they're talking idealized conditions,
Yeah.
and basically the message of NPR is it's now up to the next level, which basically is the people,
Right.
to make sure that they follow through
Right.
on their promises.
Right.
Because both countries are making significant promises.
That's right. That's right. And there have been a lot of critiques on this. In fact, there was one in the news today where they were saying it may be a lot, but it's not enough.
Well, that's also
Anyway, the next item comes from Business Spectator. the prime ministers of Pakistan and China. Interesting that this follows this previous one in which it was the U.S. and China, and this is Pakistan and China. China's making a couple of different kinds of promises to different countries. The prime ministers of Pakistan and China are reported to have witnessed the signing of 19 agreements and memorandums, mostly focused on energy. China has pledged $42 billion, of which $31 billion is dedicated to projects in the energy sector. Coal accounts for 80% of the new power.
That's not encouraging.
No, it's not. I want to point out that is investment in Pakistan. And,
that's correct.
Which is upwind from India. but it's hard for me to imagine that Pakistan is going to get that much power from coal.
Well, as it says here, coal, largely being import-based, does not fit well in a desired energy mix, especially when better options are available.
Such as solar.
The world and even China is moving out of coal for the same reason.
Yep, and Pakistan has a lot of sunshine.
That they do.
And it has a lot of wind, too. Hey.
That they do.
The next item from Think Progress says 6 years ago, this is an amazing story when you consider the extent of it and the fact that it's 6 years. Wisconsin's Gunderson Health System, which makes up a network of hospitals, health clinics, nursing homes, and other health facilities. It's a lot of buildings.
Okay,
Set a goal.
We missed one.
We missed one.
Yeah.
Which one?
G20 countries spending
Oh, yes.
$88 billion.
Okay. Yeah, let's get back to that. Despite, actually, let's finish the one on Wisconsin, because I started reading it.
Finish the next one down.
Yeah. Set a goal to reduce energy consumption. It has more than reached the goal. Every day since October 14th, 6 years after they pledged this, it has produced more energy than it consumed. Wow.
That's all right.
Wow. Yeah. Okay, back to the previous one.
Well, there's a couple of other things here.
Oh, about Wisconsin. Okay.
I don't know. This Gunderson is in more than one location. I think it's kind of spread out through the state.
It's spread out through the state, yeah.
But they rely, and this is I got some of the key here, a variety of local energy sources. Biomass, burning wood chips. Landfill, producing gas. Solar panels, wind farms, methane captured from manure. Boy, it sounds like Vermont.
Yeah, it does. And Vermont could do that. I don't know that Vermont could get 100% of its electricity from renewable resources that are in the state.
Maybe not, but they could get a lot.
They could get a lot. And the other thing too is, you know, the charts that I've seen in the last couple of weeks say that Vermont has a carbon footprint from its electricity of practically zero.
Well, yeah, because we import it all.
Well, no, but we import it all from non-carbon sources.
Mostly from hydro.
Yeah, mostly from hydro. And so, you know, there you go. Now, back to E-News Park Forest.
Yeah, the G20 countries.
Okay, despite pledging in 2009 to phase out the use of fossil fuels, and this is important, G20 countries are spending $88 billion a year in taxpayer money to discover new reserves around the world, according to a report published Tuesday by the Overseas Development Institute and Oil Change International.
That doesn't sound like a good idea to me.
No. And incidentally, we have 3 stories for today. Do you have more about this?
Well, I just got a few. Let's see. These states, the G20 states, are spending more than double on finding new regions to drill than the top 20 private oil and gas companies. These are the governments doing it.
Yeah.
Now, when they find that information, they're not going to develop them themselves. They're going to sell them to one of the oil companies.
Right.
So they're kind of...
Now, there's another little twist on this. The top 20 oil and gas companies, every single one of them makes gross upwards of $100 billion a year.
Okay.
That is more money than all of the wind turbine manufacturers and solar panel manufacturers put together. For every single one, for each one of those oil and gas companies, their gross revenues are equal to the entire wind turbine industry and the entire solar panel industry put together.
Well, here's a quick takeaway on this one. It summarizes the whole thing. The G20 government's exploration subsidies marry bad economics with potentially disastrous consequences for climate change.
Yeah.
So why are they doing it?
Well, why?
Well, they're doing it to attract revenue to their countries, ultimately.
No, I don't think so.
No.
I think it's because the oil and gas and coal industries got there first with their hands out. And in those days, 180, 75 years ago, countries are saying, yeah, we need you. And so they started subsidizing programs that didn't have termination dates.
Okay.
And they're still putting the money in.
Okay.
Now, we've got 3 items for today.
Well, I don't have them. The last thing I have is Gunderson.
And I don't think you even saw these.
Probably not.
So, but they all relate to the same thing, which is the a report that came from the International Energy Agency called the World Energy Outlook 2014.
Okay.
They all relate to that. And the first one of them gets back to this $88 billion a year for exploration subsidies, because that's not the only subsidies. Yep. Not the only subsidies those companies are getting. Try this out for size. Fossil fuels see about $550 billion a year in subsidies.
Say that again.
Fossil fuels see about $550 billion a year in subsidies.
Well, I know they get a lot of subsidies, but that sounds like a lot.
Damping investment in cleaner forms of energy, the International Energy Agency said. Now, the International Energy Agency is not some group of pro-wind activists that are hired by, this is an international body that is.
So you're saying they're relatively neutral. Honest.
They're supposed to be, and they are representing the fossil fuels, the renewables, the whole thing.
Everybody.
Crude oil, coal, and natural gas receive more than 4 times the $120 billion paid out in subsidies for renewables.
Yet we're hearing them complain all the time about the subsidies for renewables.
Every time you hear about every time you hear about subsidies from renewables, they harken back to the same thing, which is Solyndra. And these guys are getting more money that was put into Solyndra every 14 hours. Give me a break.
It's all propaganda, isn't it?
Isn't it? You know who's making out on this is the advertising agencies.
Yeah, they're doing okay.
Boy, I'll tell you. The next item, this also relates to the same thing. Renewable energy technologies are set to gain ground on fossil fuels rapidly as they are helped by falling costs and subsidies. According to the World Energy Outlook 2014, same report, it suggests that by 2040, world energy supply will be divided into 4 almost equal parts. One is low carbon sources, which they include renewable and nuclear. The second is oil, the third is natural gas, and the fourth is coal. Now, I will tell you, I think that particular projection is just about as close to being wrong as you can get. Because the amount of energy that's being produced by, they're suggesting that nuclear plus renewables is going to produce 25% of the power. I'm sorry, 25% of the energy. And they're already producing 25% of the energy. So why do we have to wait until 2040? I mean,
good point.
Nuclear is producing almost 10%. I'm talking about all energy here, not just electricity. And biomass is producing about 10%. So what are we talking about here? A large part of the energy in the worldwide comes from burning biomass in poverty areas where that's the only fuel they've got.
But it's not being burned very cleanly.
No, it's not. There are ways of making that better, though. You know, and one of them is to use, for example, if you're heating or cooking, to use a rocket stove, which is extremely efficient for in the way that it burns and produces really practically nothing in the way of pollutants.
I got a neat little video about how to make a rocket stove out of 3 cinder blocks.
Oh, really?
It's simple as hell, and it showed it working. It works. It's a rocket stove.
Yeah.
Just explain a little bit about a rocket stove.
Yeah, a rocket stove is basically it consists of 2 things that are put together. One of them is a little firebox.
Okay.
And the firebox has you put wood in from the side, and the wood that you put in is pretty small sticks. They just go in. And then above the firebox is the flue. And the flue is a very short flue, but it's highly insulated.
Okay.
So the gases in the flue do not lose heat going up it. And the result of that, and because you don't have any restrictions on the airflow, you have air just flowing through that thing. You get a fast flow.
You get a high intensity flame.
Right. It's a very hot flame. The carbon particulates that you have in a oxygen-starved flame, the carbon monoxide that comes out of the oxygen-starved flame, all of that is consumed. If there's creosote, tar, that sort of thing, that's consumed. You have a system in which there's no creosote buildup in the flue, and you have no smoke coming out. You have a very small amount of fly ash. But basically, the amount of pollution that you've got coming out of the stove is cut by about 99%. So when you have 250,000 people living in a refugee camp, and they're dependent on biomass fuel, wood or grass or whatever, for cooking, you cut the pollution by 99% in an area where people are really packed in. And in addition to that, you only use about 1/4 of the fuel.
Just by using a more efficient stove.
Just by using a more efficient stove.
Build.
That's right, that anybody could build. And this is an interesting thing. It's a really high-tech system that was invented 30 years ago. It's a very recent invention. And of course, in cooking, you're putting your pan above the flue, so you've got very hot air coming up and hitting the bottom of that pan. It's hotter than the fire in the old 3-stone system, or a system where you've got the pan right above the fire, because you don't have air flowing through and stuff like that. It's a very, very efficient system. And the rocket mass heater is another thing where you've got that system in a situation where the flue runs through a heat extraction system, which is a thermal mass which radiates heat constantly. So you can build a fire in the morning, perhaps. Maybe if it's cold weather, you can build a second one in the evening. Each one of them burns for an hour or half an hour or something. And you can heat a house that way and cut your wood consumption dramatically.
And basically run something like hot water throughout the house all day long.
What they usually do with a rocket mass heater is run it through just what is called cob, which is basically solidified mud.
Okay.
And one of the objections is that people don't like the idea of having a ton of mud in their living room. But we face these things as we come to them. That item that I just read was about the fossil fuels from the World Energy Outlook. There's one more item. We did the fossil fuels and the subsidies. We did the fossil fuels and the fact that they were set to gain rapidly. And honestly, if fossil fuels plus nuclear is 25% of the world energy supply in 2040, I will, assuming I'm still around, be astonished, because I think it's going to be upwards of 50%.
Well, the cost of nuclear is something that they're not talking about.
There's a bunch,
It's getting very, very expensive to build.
Right, and as a matter of fact, that comes up to the next one, which comes from the Nikkei Asian Review. Such developing countries as China and India will lead a projected 60% increase in worldwide nuclear power generation capacity through 2040, while costs to decommission aging reactors in advanced nations will soar, the International Energy Agency said on Wednesday in same report, World Energy Outlook report. I don't think this report is all that accurate on that either, because I think that the Chinese and the Indians are going to look at nuclear power and say, why should we put up a plant that costs so much when we can do the same amount with solar and wind? And it costs less.
Ultimately, the marketplace is going to make that decision everywhere.
That's right. That's right. We're in a position where, unless somebody takes over the world or whatever, it's going to be the marketplace that makes the decision. And I honestly think that the people who are closest to taking over the world right now are probably the fossil fuel industry and possibly the nuclear industry with it, because they've got the resources. They've got, how much of that $550 billion a year in subsidies are they
slightly putting into their own pockets?
Well, I was going to say putting into the pockets of their advertising agencies and their PR people.
They're making out too. They probably own their advertising.
They probably do. And, that $550 billion can say a lot in a country like the United States, where a company is a person with First Amendment rights.
Yeah.
And
how neat.
Yeah, how neat. Exactly. Yeah. And it's some of the things that they say are outrageous, and people believe them. You can't try this out. Try this out, Tom. You can't depend on solar for your. You couldn't. There's no way. I actually read this morning. There is no way you could run an electricity system on 100% solar.
Okay. Yeah. Unless you live in the land of the midnight sun.
But that includes storage.
Oh, that including storage? Including storage. You'll have to explain this one to me.
Well, this is what the guy says. He says you can't do it with solar because there's no way you could get your power from solar, because solar is intermittent. And he never mentioned the fact that there is this thing called a battery that somebody invented about 200 years ago, and that there are many, many ways of storing power. So
more and more every day. New ways, old ways, new old ways, old new ways.
Right. And what this particular guy was saying was interesting, because it wasn't just solar. It was solar, wind, hydro, all forms. And he was saying Scotland cannot achieve its goal of 100% reliance on renewable power.
Didn't they do that in August?
No, he's talking about year-round, 24/7. Well, we talked about Mecklenburg-Vorpommern, which was producing, and we talked today about Wildpolsried, which is producing 500% of the power that it needs. Tokelau, an island in the South Pacific, is running 100% on solar and batteries. They do have diesel backup power, just in case, which, by the way, is powered by coconut oil. And but the power industry, the nuclear industry, the fossil fuel industry would just love to have everybody believe you will not be able to throw a switch and get your lights on in the middle of the night if you're 100% reliant on renewable power, or it'll cost too much. Okay, so I go to you as an engineer and I say, can we do 100% renewable in Vermont? And what do you say?
I say, when do we start?
But the big thing here is, how much is it going to cost?
Yeah.
If you go to any decent engineer and you say, this is what I want to do, he's going to say, well, you have to pay the price.
Yeah.
And today, as we're seeing, the price is going below the price of grid power.
Correct.
And solar is going below the price of nuclear.
Correct.
Which means that you have a plant that is paid off in 10 years, and then it's producing power for free. And it's going to be there for the next 100 years, and it costs almost nothing to decommission it. And there is no waste that you have to worry about. Where are you going to put the money into nuclear? Why would you put the money into nuclear? I don't get it. Well, we're coming up.
It's partly the way the economic system works.
Yeah.
The large-scale investors control the economic system.
Yeah.
And they like large-scale investments.
Yes. But they're learning.
And for one thing, it keeps out all the cats and dogs,
Well, that's true. Tom, we're coming up to the end of the hour.
Yeah, we are.
So
According to that, there's 35 seconds left.
we'll say goodbye to everybody.
Well,
Goodbye.
everybody.
We spin and we toil, we work all day, sowing and reaping, we store goods away, so we can be dressed well.